Super. Well, welcome everybody to our Successful Engagement Talking Direct to Your Audience seminar for this afternoon with the delectable Moz Dee.
Delectable.
Delectable, there's a word for the day. I know. Can you tell we're both in marketing? So great to see. We've got some great people on the call. We have Paul Mirage, who is our Business Connect guy up here that wanted me to replace the gin bottle when I did a seminar the other week. So Paul is infamously here. So Moz, thank you so much for doing this today. Moz is our hero. He's also part of our podcast. So if you've listened to the Bitter Chat, the Bitter podcast, that we talk about on our social media, Moz is part of that for us, which is great. I think we're in week 5 or episode 5 or 6.
Episode 5, yes, and a couple more to come. So I've really enjoyed doing it. Some cracking stories.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. And stories is a key, and we're going to talk about stories a bit later on in this seminar. But you've worked with some amazing brands that the guys on the call will know. And you've worked with some amazing different businesses as well. So tell us a bit about your background, Moz, before we get started. People know a bit more about you.
Well, hello, everyone. As I think those that heard the weather chat will know, I'm talking to you from the county of Kerry, down in the southwest of Ireland. And I know that's a part of the world Sarah knows well. We are not having a heat wave, by the way, just to be clear. It's been raining here, but this is where my home is, where I live. My office is I've got an office in New York, but one in London. And I used to commute backwards and forwards until the dreaded COVID struck. Media, my Irish connection brought me into media, Sarah. My mother and father are Irish. I was brought up in a place called Coventry in the Midlands.
Lost your accent.
The glamorous city of Coventry. People will know and they'll smile as I say that. I used to be in plays. I used to do plays. I used to do Irish plays. And there was a fella came up to me who said, and I would very often have an Irish accent in these plays. And he came up to me and he said, look, we're looking to run an Irish magazine program for the Irish diaspora in the United Kingdom. And he said, would you be interested in presenting this? And I said, well, of course, I'd be delighted to do so. And he was taken aback because he expected me to have a proper, he expected me to have, because that's the accent he'd heard on stage. But it didn't stop him. And I got into radio as a result of trying to provide news and information, a bit like Bitter, really. It's this sort of Anglo-Irish thing that got me into radio. From there, very quickly, I went to a thing called talkRadio, which was, for those of us old enough to remember Radio 1's old medium wave frequency, talkRadio overtook that. I was a presenter on that. And then it became a thing called TalkSport. I ran that, and before going to the BBC, and was managing editor at a thing called BBC Radio 5 Live, before going back to TalkSport to become program director of TalkSport. And it was whilst at TalkSport that, because it was a commercial station, we started interacting with loads of different brands, whether publishers and brands, advertisers. And I said to myself, this content thing, this storytelling thing, there's something in this that could take me beyond radio into all sorts of different platforms and formats that I need to work on. So that's when I formed a company called Contented Digital Media with my business partner. And we broke out and we formed this business about 7 years ago now. Yeah. And we've worked with some really interesting people, from the likes of Heineken and their Strongbow, Bulmers, my favourite.
There's a theme running here, Moz, of alcohol.
Excuse me?
There's a theme.
There is, isn't there? There is. No idea why. I know what's in the corner of your room, Sarah. So
you do, actually, yes.
Yeah. And then there's Birra Moretti and all sorts that we've dealt with there across all sorts of different platforms. HSBC, Jaguar, really, really big brands, and really, really small brands, really startup brands, through to massive petrochemical companies. Because there's one thing, we're going to talk about this, Sarah, I know, that binds all these things, whether it's booze or building, is that everyone's got stories to tell. And it's about telling that story that Contented's at the heart of.
Fantastic. So one of the things that we've looked at is within Bitter, there are a number of type of businesses, and we always say things like, we're quite construction centric, but in reality, we're not. Your background and mine It really doesn't matter about the product, it's about the thought process and how we can support people. But we as Bitter tend to talk about our customers and our clients, but you really talk about your clients as an audience. And I think that's sort of holds together what you're going to talk about engaging and talking direct to that audience. Why do you sort of describe them as an audience as opposed to a customer base or a client base?
I think this was a thing that really at the very start of our company really got us noticed, and it began to open up a conversation, was that we talk about footfall, we talk about clients, we talk about cost per customer, we talk about that. When actually we like to talk about audience. I think one of the reasons is because we came from a broadcast background, that we always thought of audience. But actually, if you translate that into the commercial world that everyone listening or watching on demand now is, everything's an audience. So Bitter nights out, right? You lot get together and you have your big tables and you get the booze out. What do? You all project yourselves as people, as individuals, but the brands and the companies that you work with by telling stories. You tell stories to each other. You tell the stories of how the business was formed and made, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You tell those stories to each other and you form those connections and those bonds. And so at Bitter, in a very, really visceral way, you see that in action. And I suppose all that I would advocate, and what we're talking about here, is taking that very same storytelling and projecting it onto the audience, the customer base. So that gives them something to connect with and draws them in to your brand and what you're talking about. And you're dead right, Sarah, in what you're saying. I don't care if it's, you're Jackie O'Donovan selling skip hire or waste disposal, right? Or, somebody else selling plumbing products. It doesn't matter what you do. Your customer base, your circle of engagement want to be regarded not only as somebody who comes to the counter, who has an account to get a load of stuff and drive away again, but want to be regarded as an individual and as a human being. And they want to personify your brand. They want to understand what your brand values are and what they mean. And it really, and you said it at the top, and I think you're so right, it doesn't matter what you're selling. It's all the same. So we have to get good at telling those stories, at building a brand profile through that storytelling. Absolutely.
No, it is absolutely key to engage with the guys. Because they need to understand that background. They want to buy from you, don't they, in a lot of instances, as a person as well as the business and the product. So for the guys on the call then, if they, for example, we've worked out what our audience, our story is, we know who our audience is, our sort of client, our target base, who we're trying to speak to, and of course not forgetting that we have existing clients and potential new ones, because people tend to forget that bit. There's people you deal with already. What would you say is the best way to get that out there, especially at the moment when the world is so noisy? How would you say that our guys should look? What are the best channels that they should look at to portray that story? Obviously, we can do Zoom, but we can't sit in a room as Bitter, for example. We can't sit at our luncheons and sit around a table over a beer with people at the moment.
Well, I think spot on again, Sarah. I think we were talking about it beforehand. We live in a different age now. We live in a different time, and I think the exists. So where do you get new business from? And we all know this as business people, is upsell. So we get more business and we increase our business and we increase our growth by looking at our existing audience base and understanding that. But also our opportunity for growth is about that audience that doesn't understand us at the moment or doesn't know we're there. All right. And sometimes we sitting in a room and thinking about that for a bit is really important, because you say we all know what our audience is. Sarah, right? Because you deal with your clients on this, is that very often people don't really know who their audience is.
Absolutely.
I think they think they know who their audience is, because they see them in front of them. I think taking a little bit of time out, what do I mean by that, is like 3 or 4 hours, half a day, working with a professional like Sarah, or working with somebody, even in your own group, and say, right, who needs our services that we're not currently talking to? Who is outside of our orbit? Particularly in the world we live in now, where we're moving into a new era, where people have different needs and they're thinking differently about their own businesses, is actually, there's maybe an area of opportunity we haven't even thought of yet. thinking about what our traditional audience is in this new era is a mistake. There's all sorts of new people that will be looking for, and I keep talking about skips because Jackie O'Donovan's got it drilled into my head, is that, you know, there's a whole sort of new type of individual or person who's coming to the market domestically and commercially because there's different needs. How do we talk to that different audience? So I think really drilling down on that and spending some time thinking about that's really important. But once identified is knowing where they are.
Yeah.
Right? And I think what a big mistake that lots of companies make is they go, right, I'll tell you what we'll do. We've got this sorted. Barry's the intern guy, right? He's on, Barry, mate, how are you? You're a young lad. Do you know how Facebook works? Right, throw us up a Facebook. Throw us up an old Facebook page.
It's the best, isn't it?
Throw us up an old Facebook page, will you? And take a couple of snaps and stick the logo on and get a couple of shares and bang up a couple of likes, and we'll see how that works. That's going to do nothing. That is literally, it's great for your family and your friends and maybe some existing customers, but that isn't about telling a story, about building your brand, about reaching out, about building potential business. That is an internal sort of, I could use the word vanity project. It's just not really going to do anything. All right. So understand where your audience is. Understand and do some research on who's buying your product. Are they on Facebook? Or actually, are the vast majority of them Instagram followers? Are those people engaged with Twitter? What part of the digital infrastructure are they on? And once you understand that, that becomes the vehicle and the gateway for you to interrupt their feeds and get to talk to them. But understand where they are. And it's a mix and match approach. Yeah. You know, some of that might be if those people are in a locality at a point, you know, outdoor advertising, what people are doing. You know, it still works. It can still work if you're very targeted, understand where your audience are. Outdoor advertising, buying a bit of space in a very specialist magazine, that all still works. And when I talk to people about sort of digital marketing, it's not instead of something, it's as well as something. If it still works, you amplify what you're already doing, and together it can be extremely powerful. So once you've identified that and where they are, you really target that down and be succinct on your messaging, Sarah, with that particular platform and understand how that works.
And one of the questions I guess some of the guys would have, maybe that are on the call or be watching later on, is, and I kind of get the answer to this, but for the benefit of everyone else, there's an element of, like you say, the guys that will go, Barry's in the office and he's young, so he knows what he's doing. But I suppose the question for a lot of people is this something that your current team can be doing, or is it more beneficial and more cost effective to actually look at and getting an expert in, even if it's only from a coaching and guidance and direction perspective? But would you say, yeah, if you're going to do it, make sure you've got either the right team or bring in the people that are going to help you pull that together? Right.
Now, I think you're dead spot on. Look, I'm not here to sell us, Sarah, necessarily. Hey, you've got our number. It was on the web. You know how to get in touch with Sarah and how to get in touch with me. I'd always say, look, get an expert in. But listen, stand back for a bit. And I would do, no matter what business you're doing, you do a skills audit. And do a skills audit and sit down with your team and say, right, actually, there might be some real hidden talents that already exist in your team and in your group. They may be, young and old. Do a skills audit about what people know and understand about platforms, and who can, ask people to ask for input from your staff on what they think might work. I mean, very often in our own business, what we say is that our staff are our salespeople, no matter what point in the process they're at, and no one knows my customers better than my staff. And for them to come back and say, Moz, mate, what are you doing? What? That podcast you're doing, Fully enough, podcasting's a big thing and everyone's listening to them. So Moz, actually, that's a great thing that you're doing for Bitter because everyone's listening to it. But if we were doing sort of IGTV or Instagram stories, for instance, on another our staff can come back and go, that's not working because the people we want to talk to are not in that position. They're not going to utilize it and they're not going to engage with it. So do a staff audit initially. What are the skills in the room? Ask people to input, ask people to do a little report for you about how they think that social or digital engagement could work. And if that skill set's there, employ that and get people enthused by it. Never make this mistake of thinking marketing in this area is a nice appendage, an add-on or whatever that Barry the intern can do or somebody can do in their spare time. Yes, you might have internal resource, but make that part of that person's job description. Make it part of their KPIs. Make it part of what they get up in the morning to do for you. So they really feel empowered to engage with your audience using these different skills and different sets. And of course, as you know, Sarah, there are different ways of engaging. One's organically, and what do we mean by, so we talk about two forms of media, paid and organic. And organic can work if you've got the right type of storytelling and the right type of tools. Organic means that using your existing platform. So if you've got a Facebook page already, or you've got a Twitter page already, or you've got, you know, Instagram or any other platform that you're using already that you create is organic. That's organic. Mm-hmm. And that what you can do with that is through storytelling and the right mindset make that work. And actually, you're right. If you've got a consultant in for half a day, or you've got a consultant in for a day to train your staff on using your organic assets, that might be all it needs, depending on your business and depending on what you're trying to achieve. But that little bit of investment in that expertise could drive your, as long as you're committed to that team doing it, drive what you need. What do we mean by paid media? Paid media means that you invest in making sure that any stories you tell or any advertising that you have appears directly in relevant feeds. So if you're selling plumbing equipment, right, and you've got a story to tell and you've drilled down on what your story and brand value is, and you've got paid for media, Facebook will, or, you know, whatever platform you use through an algorithm that you paid for, because you're paying them money, will make sure it appears in the relevant feeds of the relevant people. And by the way, this doesn't have to cost a huge amount of money. You can have a very targeted, very simple campaign for thousands of pounds, not tens of thousands, for thousands of pounds, that you understand what you're getting you understand what you're getting back for that. So those are the differences. So I would always advocate, do an audit, see what's in-house, Sarah, see what you don't have to spend money on, just allocate the resource internally. But if not, it's always worth doing, right? Always worth doing. But I mean, the beginning bit for this for me is always understanding why you're doing it. Because that's the other thing, isn't it? I've got to have a Facebook page.
Got to have a website. Don't know what to do with it.
Our website. And the amount of websites I go to or whatever, and it's very nice. I'm not knocking it, where there's a little bit of a vid, you know, of the products and whatever. And I suppose if I'm going, what you want is people coming to that website. And you want, why are people coming to that website? And so if I'm coming to a website and you've got your desktop activity there, is when I come to it, why am I coming to it? Why am I coming to it? And when I'm there, what are you giving to me that's going to engage? What are you giving me? And that thing has to be, that needs thinking. It will up your productivity. It will up your lead quota. It will up everything if you understand, right, what will bring somebody to this point, and when they're at this point, what do I want to say to them? Because what we haven't got time for in this digital age, I'll go to a website and go, right, okay, fucking well, yeah, people. All right, what's that mean? Right, people, contacts, here's a few stories, and it's page after page, and I've got to go behind there. 1 or 2 pages on a website. 1 or 2 pages, and a button to click that makes me buy something or gives me a direct inquiry. That is simplicity, quick navigation. But how do you get me there in the first place? All right, that's what you're after. How do you get me into your showroom? How do you get me picking up the phone and ordering? How do you do that? I go back to the start, is through a story. The story of your brand, the story of your service, the story of what you want it to be. Yeah,
absolutely. So you've obviously worked for companies, and we talked before about different sizes of business and different sizes of brand that you've done. So have you got a few examples that you could maybe share with the group that would give them an example of marketing that you've put together that's worked for them, sort of examples in practice.
Mm-hmm.
Not to put you on the spot, Moz, but I'm putting you
No,
on the spot.
you've done that, haven't you? Well, let's start with the big one, because communication comes in many forms. But so like HSBC, the world's biggest bank, you know, and it's true, you know, I don't care people listening or watching this as a recording, how big or small your company is. Don't worry, I'm fine. Don't worry, I've been tested. Okay.
All right, but I'm agreeing with you, it's fine.
You're not in the same room. No one's in the same room. All the same mistakes are made. So it doesn't matter if you're HSBC or Lizzie from Doncaster with 2 staff doing that. If you look at it, very often we go into companies, they still make the same mistakes. And what HSBC were doing, and we went in, is they said, look, our staff aren't engaging with our projects. And we've got thousands of staff across the world, hundreds of thousands of staff, and we're sending this stuff out. And I said, what are you sending them out? What are you sending out? And they were sending out blogs, written blogs,
right,
with a few photos on it. And they were sending out these things saying, right, they had this just sort of job exchange scheme. So actually, if you were working in London, what they're saying is, why don't you come to Singapore for a bit and see what it's like out here? Or why don't you do that out there? And so they were sending lovely, lovely articles with photos on it and sticking it, guess where? On a website. And so the staff are there, and they can't be bothered, truly not asked. They're too busy, nice photos, whatever. So our advice was then is to take all those down. Let's take the essence of what you're saying in that article. Let's get the essence of what you're trying to say. And actually, if anyone was interested, I'm quite happy to share these videos. As we all know, anybody who's tried to present video on Zoom will know it doesn't work. It's really it goes like that. It doesn't work. So actually, I'm happy to distribute examples so people can see it. So what we did is we just really pull that way of communicating down into a short 2-minute video, which gave you stats and reasons why it would be good fun to work in Singapore.
Yeah.
Or why it would be good when we were allowed to move around, that is, when it was good time to New York or whatever, and their engagement level went up by 80% internally. And that's one of our case studies, 80%. So taking something off the written page, turning it into a video, people immediately went, wow, right, okay, I'm in that. I'm engaged. I'm having a coffee break. I've just gone on the intranet. Actually, Singapore sounds quite tasty. I'll engage. I'll ask some questions about it. So that's one example of it. And as you all know, our brains work really quickly visually, right? We absorb more visually. 70% of all our communication, 70% of our communication as human beings is based on visual, physicality, and what we see. So it's when you read something, and when you, a great example of this, I wasn't even born then, but JF Kennedy and Nixon.
Right.
And the debates, when they started debates, they did the radio debate and the television debate. So those that were listening, right, had Nixon winning that debate. Those who watched had JFK as winning the debate. Because if you looked at the podium, Nixon was sweating and his body language was all wrong. He was nervous and he was shifty. When you listened to him, he was assured and authoritative, but he didn't look like that. And JFK was this, we all know what he looked like. You know, he was this handsome, very charismatic guy, assured or whatever. He won that debate. Visuals win out. You know, it's just interesting on the dynamics of different mediums and how they work. And 70% of all our communication is visual. So a video, bang, at the center of what you're about and telling your story immediately draws people in. You've immediately got my attention and I'm immediately talking to you. So that worked for them. Another, I'm trying to think of a smaller, a petrochemical company, right? Bloody chemicals. People go, dull. Well, it's not if you talk to the people that are in and talking about petrochemical companies. And what we did there is we told the story of the people that work within the company. Because if I say to you now, let's talk about petrochemicals, I guarantee that there's not many of us on this, but you know, let's talk petrochemical. People glaze over.
We don't want to lose anyone.
They're glazing over. So what we did is we got people that worked in the laboratories and we talked about what their work actually did. So for instance, in this particular petrochemical company, what they did resulted in some of the fastest cars in the world on the F1 track. So we talked about their pride at the fact what they do, their tiny little bit and their bits of technology that company did or provided went to make a famous F1 team and develop that. Or the little bits of technology or work that went to help build really, really strong, robust containers that could hold water in a really, really safe way for people marching across who were collecting water and having to walk back to it. So we personified and told a story. Right? It's a petrochemical company, but it has a direct effect on how those people are and what they did. Worked for a construction company, and we didn't tell the story of bricks and mortar. We told the story of the people who would live in those houses, right? So that when an architect comes and thinks about an architect, when a guy's bricklaying, when you're putting the roof on, you're putting that together, the quality that you're doing is a great, but the real human beings are going to live in those houses. Real human beings are going to use those toilets. Right. So everything that goes into that house and the construction thereof has a real life human effect on the people that are within it. So telling that story says everything about that construction brand and the way they feel about their product and what they're building their product for.
And I think that we've come back in a way full circle, haven't we? We've done external comms and internal comms, but all of it comes back to everyone pulling together and everyone engaging with that story of the business, the why we're here and why you would want to engage with it. And I think in a lot of instances, people forget internal comms, don't they?
They do.
They forget. And I used to say, I had a load of wagon drivers working in my branches years ago. And I used to say my wagon drivers were the best marketing people.
Oh, dead right. Yeah.
Because they were the guys that saw everyone every day. And internal comms then was so important to me, because I said, if those guys on the ground don't get why we're doing it, not going to pass the right message on. So you having that sort of internal comms strategy that you've looked at even with HSBC and getting them to engage and how they can engage their team, whether it's moving to a different location or engaging in the company message, I guess you would say that's got to be a really, really important part of that comms.
And when you're dead right, and when people are working hard and you're trying to build a P&L and you're working in you're wholesaling electrical equipment, right? The last thing you sit and think about is company purpose or company communication, right? Very often, it's less so these days, but certainly when I was growing up, a lot of people go, it's all nonsense, it's all airy-fairy stuff, it doesn't mean anything. Well, actually what we do recognize now, that actually taking a little bit of time to look at the people that work in that warehouse, work in that wholesalers, you're selling electrical equipment and appliances, etc. But actually having a couple of brand values that's really succinct and really simple and really easy to engage with increases business and sales. And I've got case studies, which again, maybe not for now, that can demonstrate and prove that if somebody can walk into your business and you can tell that person, here are our values, this is why we do things, and this is why we're a better person, better company to work with than, say, our competitors down the road. And that within an induction process, that person at the counter, somebody comes in and they can tell that person or ooze that person's going to buy off them. They're going to buy more off them because it's a clear, succinct message. And again, I don't care how big or small the company is, there's different ways. It's not about spending loads of money. Sometimes it's about just spending a little bit of time to really get that message through. Why is that warehouse, why is your wholesalers better than theirs? Just ask yourself that question. You'll be amazed the amount of businesses that don't ask themselves that question at all. Why should somebody buy off me rather than them? Because it ain't all about price. It's never always about price. Never always about price. So take that time for internal comms, because that internal comms will then inform your external comms. All of it's in a straight line, and bring people and develop that to that business. I think, you know, and again, take time to understand the story of your business, what the essence of that business is, what is its tale. If you're, and again, we do this in workshops with brands, we sit and go, if your brand was a person, and I know, Sarah, you do this, if your brand was a person, what sort of person would it be? You know, what would it be? Would that brand be, would your business be a 26-year-old, energetic, risk-taking individual? Is that, well, your brand needs to tell that story then? Or is your brand steady, strong, authoritative, experienced, you know, knows that particular sector of the industry inside out? Then that story needs to reflect that. That story needs to be told.
Yeah.
And there are different ways of telling that story, but it's really worth it. Really worth it. I would say that, wouldn't I? I mean, I would say that. There's case study after case study after case study that proves that it works, proves that it makes money. It doesn't, you know, you can see it coming back in pounds and shillings and euros.
But it makes sense. It's not rocket science, is it?
No.
It makes absolute sense. Like you said right at the beginning, you need know who your audience is, where they are, what's going to resonate with them, and engage them in that story of your business, of why you're there, why you are the people to buy from or use their services from. And I think once they engage with that, they get it, and they're much more willing to buy. And then, as you say, it doesn't come down to price anymore in a lot of instances, because they've bought into your story, they've bought into your why almost, haven't they? Which is ideal. Completely true. And I think that's now, at this point in our history, I mean, what a weird time, right, that we've all been through. But I would ask everyone watching this, let's be positive. And I would say now is a time to reset all our thinking on not what we can't do, but what we can do. What can we do to move forward in all our, you know, it's tough in every industry and every business, but what are the things that we can do? How do we pivot? How do we create a new demand? There's a big discussion taking place here in Ireland, and I think, and the UK are having discussions as well, is we're all waiting to get back to normal, right? That normal more than likely isn't going to happen again, ever, right? So we've lost demand in different pockets of our existing business, and we're waiting for that demand to come back in different pockets. I think what we all have to do, and certainly the clients that I'm working with at the moment, are all on a reset. And that reset being, so I'm working for a big global office company. Imagine owning, right, around about $300 million worth of office real estate globally. Ouch.
Bit frightening. They're putting massive marketing investment in repositioning what the office is. All right. So you think, again, what we're talking about at the time, it's a really good example, actually, is rethinking what does the office mean now? We're all at home. I don't know where you guys are. Some of you will be in the office, some of you are in home offices. I'm here in the back of my kitchen, in front of me fire. And Sarah's next to a booze cabinet, incredible booze cabinet. And we're all sat here and we're all having a chat. But actually, offices still inform an important part, because actually it's where we will have to meet and train people. We will have to engage with people, but not in the way that we used to. So we're not going to go into the office 9 to 5. They're over. But actually what this office is opening is an environment that you can dip in and out of, that you can arrange meetings in a really safe space, that can provide technical facilities for you to do that, that is therefore reflected in a rate card, that's open across the world, and all of a sudden you think, right, this is exciting. There's a story here, not about death, but about a rebirth of a business. We can get into this and we can tell that story about re-engaging in a different way. Creating a new demand for an old thing. So creating a demand in a different way for a new thing. And they're spending millions on a whole new reset. And I suppose you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. You've got to roll the dice. How do we make this thing work for us? And it's really quite exciting. But I think for all of us as businesses, we have to start taking that approach, is how do we behave differently and reset and make that really exciting, not only for our existing customer base, but for those who might be coming after them, hopefully.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. It's a sort of an adapt and evolve scenario for a lot of businesses, isn't it? That would be the key. I'm just looking, obviously, towards time for everybody. Hopefully everyone's enjoyed what we've said so far. I've really enjoyed it, and I've been in marketing for years, and I really enjoyed it.
It's nice to talk to you.
Pardon?
It's nice to talk to you.
Yeah, no, it's been absolutely superb. So
pity we can't have a drink.
I know, I've got plenty of wine.
It's all very watery. All very,
I'm on coffee. I'm being good. But if you could leave any sort of pearl of wisdom for the guys on the call, when you talk about engagement and talking direct, that was the subject of today, is all about talking direct to that audience and giving them that message that really resonates with them. Is there something that you would say, if you guys do nothing else, go away and
think about it. Think about it. One, just to enter your consciousness. The second thing, right, and it costs no money to do this, right, is to get your teams together, no matter how big or small, and say, and if you may know already, and you may have done this work, but if you haven't, it's to sit down and go, right, and it might sound like a really stupid question on the surface of it, but believe me, it's sitting around, who are our customers? Right, just ask that question. And you might get some of your staff saying, well, don't be stupid, we know who our customers are. Well, do you? Get the purchase ledger out. Who's buying from you? Right? Who's buying from you? And really understand that. And ask your customers, ask your audience, ask your clients. And lots of people don't do this. I do that all the time. I swear to you, it works. They love it, by the way, as well. Is you go to a client and say, why are you buying from me? Ask them that.
Yeah.
And you'll learn. And it doesn't cost you anything. You don't need a research company. Go and ask your customers why they buy from you. And they'll go and do a survey. Get that in. And it gives you so much rich data on a very, very simple analog basis of why. And then ask. Then what you've got to do, the better question is finding out why people aren't buying from you. So then why are people buying? But more importantly, why aren't they buying from you? Why are people buying that product but not that product? And when you've got that data, you're data rich all of a sudden. And you can say, right, what do I need to get that people? My behavior needs to change. The company's behavior needs to change. They think we're a bit, they think we're cheap and cheerful. Now that works if you want to be cheap and cheerful, but it might not work. Maybe that's not how you think about yourself. So it's like anything, isn't it? How people perceive you is reality. So I think what you should do, the least you can do, the one thing you can do is ask your customers why they're purchasing from you, why they're buying from you. And then from that is building out a matrix to find out why people aren't buying from you. And it's a dead simple, easy, all it needs is time and investment.
Powerful though, when you get that kind of information.
Yeah, isn't it?
Absolutely. So just before we close, we've had a question from Paul. Paul has asked, and this will be an interesting one for you, Moz. Have you ever turned down a prospect client that you didn't want to work with? And if so, why?
That's a great question, isn't it?
It's a good question, isn't it? Yeah.
I'll tell you, I didn't say no and I took the money, but then I stopped working with them. And that company was British American Tobacco.
Really?
Yeah. And we began a project with them, which was about their story, the story that they wanted to tell. This is Chatham House rules, isn't it?
Yeah.
Although we're going to publish this, but it doesn't matter. Is the story they wanted to tell is how they benefited the societies that they worked in. They invested millions of dollars in Indonesia, growing these fields. They built schools. They did that. They did that. They did that. And I've got to be honest, I convinced myself that this was a moral project. And we started to do some work. And I tell you what changed it for me was my staff and my other customers. And my staff, who were in the main younger people. Well, it's not hard to be younger than me these days, but they're younger. And they said, look, we feel really uncomfortable working on this. We just feel really uncomfortable about it. Mm. And then we talked about, and other customers said, we're really uncomfortable about the fact that you're working with them. So we had to take a view, really. So we politely declined and stopped working with them. Mm. So it's a good question. Yeah. But that's the one instance where I felt actually we're not comfortable telling your story, because the story, you know, the end product, which is fags, basically. I don't care what way you wrap it up, it's fags. Yeah. Isn't great. So therefore, that was the one company we start working with.
Paul says thank you, very honest answer, and I think you're absolutely right. I think I had a very interesting conversation with somebody this morning about startup businesses, and you go into that panic mode of, we'll say yes to anybody.
Of course you do. Yeah, well, we all do.
Yeah. But I think there does come a time when you have to look at your values and your why of your business back to your story and say, sorry, but no, this doesn't sit well with us.
No.
And I think the fact that you engaged and understood where your team was sitting with it, that's massive, isn't it? Because that goes back to that internal comms piece and engaging with your team and your clients and saying, this is how we're putting our business together, these are our values, and they will resonate with you and stay with you, or they'll go, don't like this, and they'll go.
Yeah, again, Sarah, back to the beginning, it's about personification. So what person are you as a business? What does a business represent? And if you're saying this and doing that, then very quickly, you know, don't you? You go, actually, this isn't us. This doesn't fit with us at all. But you have to do that work initially, which gives you a greater opportunity, not only to what you say yes or no to, but back to what Paul was saying, but actually again because this is about winning more business. If you know what you're about and you know who you are, you know what you're good at, you know, it allows you to target more succinctly the new business that you're after. Because you know, if they hear my story, they're going to buy from me, because I am them, that I resonate with their values, and I'm going to bring them in. It sounds all very, I suppose it is evangelical, and I do get evangelical about it, only because I've seen it work time and time and time again, and that any investment that's put into it, it does come back and is demonstrable.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Hopefully, everyone has enjoyed that. Laura has just peeked back onto my screen as well. So, thank you so much, Moz. That was amazing. Guys in the audience, hopefully you enjoyed it. I think Laura is going to put that on our bittercommunity.org website later.